Hello, and welcome back again to That Tracks F1 podcast. It's great to have you here. So how was your Suzuka weekend? Did you enjoy the racing? What did we think to it being a little bit more of a mixed bag this weekend? There's certainly lots to talk about. There's lots that's happened. There's lots of driver opinions. But before we get to all the chat and all the discussion, can I please ask you to like, follow and subscribe, because it would, as I always say, mean the absolute world to me. If you could give us a follow or a like or a nice comment on our socials as well, you can find me on Facebook and Instagram at That Tracks F1 Podcast. Thank you. So let's kick things off with free practice. The free practice sessions I thought were quite interesting this week. We certainly saw a lot of offs. We saw a lot of people having mechanical issues. It was a mixed bag for a lot of drivers. FP1 saw a lot of people going wide at Spoon. That seemed to be a corner that a lot of people were struggling with. Verstappen, Russell, Lindblad, Lawson, they all had a moment there. Albon had a biggish moment at Degner and then went on to collide with Perez later on. But at the end of FP1, the order was Russell, Antonelli, Norris and Piastri. And that was really my first surprise this weekend, that I think we expected, obviously, the Mercedes to be right up there, but for the Ferraris to be mixing it with them. But the McLarens looked quite on the pace this weekend, so that was good to see them up there. And in FP2, again, Leclerc seemed to struggle a bit with his car. It looked very lively, lots of oversteer through the S's. He had good control of that car, but it did look a handful. And Hamilton said that he himself had just got no confidence in the car. It was more bad luck for Lando Norris, who had a hydraulic leak. And then when he did manage to get on the track, he went wide at Spoon. Lindblad was another one that was unlucky. A lock-up, then technical issues that meant that every time he tried to downshift, it triggered the anti-stall. So he ended up boxing. But at the end of FP2, the order was Piastri, Antonelli, Russell and Norris. And again, we were seeing the McLarens right up there with the Mercedes, which I think is really encouraging. FP3, again, Leclerc looked like he was struggling with a car with a very tenuous rear grip. Poor Lando Norris's bad luck continued yet again, an ERS replacement, and that was his last battery in his allotment for the season. So every time that the battery, should it need replacing, is replaced, that will trigger a 10-place grid penalty for him, which is absolutely not what he needed. Bearman had a bit of a spin at Spoon, and there was just lots and lots of complaints in this session about drivers blocking other drivers and obstructing other drivers. It just all looked a little bit messy, I thought. But FP3 finished with Antonelli topping it, then Russell, Leclerc and Piastri. So we saw that little bit of a more of a return to form with Leclerc getting up there. Moving on to qualifying. Quali 1 saw Russell having a little bit of a struggle and complaining quite a bit about oversteer in the car. By contrast, Leclerc was absolutely flying and really did look a danger to those Mercedes. At the end of Quali 1, the drivers that were out were Stroll, Alonso, Bottas, Perez, Bearman and Albon. And I think the biggest surprise there was Ollie Bearman going out in Q1, because we've certainly seen great things from Ollie this season so far, and I was certainly bigging him up recently, saying that he could absolutely do no wrong, but he really did seem to struggle here in Suzuka, which I don't quite understand why. It's not that it's a track he hasn't been at before. It's not even a track where he hasn't done well at before. So I'm not quite sure what was going on for Ollie there, but a little bit of a disappointing qualifying for him. We also saw that moment, didn't we, when Albon went back into the garage and there was a bit of a cryptic conversation that went on between him and his race mechanic when he asked where was he slow, in what corners, and he got the answer, oh, you don't want to know. And then I'm obviously paraphrasing a little bit here and breaking the full conversation down. Albon said, I complained for 3 races in a row that something's wrong, but I'm sure it's my driving style. Laced heavily with sarcasm, so I sense that all is not quite well there at Williams with Albon. Potentially, to me, that speaks of a driver that feels he's not being listened to by the team, which would be a real shame. So hopefully things will go better for Albon, because he's had a lot of bad luck this weekend, and it really so far this season luck hasn't fallen his way, but this weekend it really did seem to quite peak for him. Also in Quali 2 we saw Russell complaining, how can I lose this much pace? He felt it was very much something wrong with the car, that he'd not changed anything. He felt it was probably aerodynamic. And then right at the end of Quali 2, along comes Lindblad on an absolute stormer lap and knocks Verstappen out. Verstappen brought the car back and complained at length about the car, labelling it completely undrivable. So at the end of Quali 2, the drivers that went out were Sainz, Lawson, Colapinto, Hülkenberg, Ocon and Verstappen. So that brings us to Quali 3. And I felt a little bit that we a little bit got denied that final last rush where everybody pushes for pole and puts in their final lap, and we're watching the timers count down because the conditions really changed on the racetrack. The wind got up, the temperature dropped, and nobody was really improving in what they'd already done. And so it ended up with Leclerc 4th, Piastri 3rd, Russell in 2nd, and Antonelli taking his 2nd pole on the bounce, which was really very impressive. He certainly did it with some style, left very little on the table. So well done to Kimi on your 2nd pole. So, race day rolled round, and with a slightly more mixed up grid, at least at the front, I thought we might be in for something a little bit different, a little bit interesting. But I did also wait for what I thought was possibly the inevitable. Lights would go out, Ferraris would whip straight to the front and get in front of the Mercedes. However, it wasn't quite that straightforward this time. It seemed they held the cars for quite a long time before the lights went out on this particular start compared to the others so far. But when they did get off the line, it was a mixed bag for the top 6. Piastri got an absolutely lightning start straight the way up and taking the lead. It was really, really incredible. Charles Leclerc was another one who got away really, really well. Antonelli was really the biggest loser, losing 3 places off the line. He got wheel spin and said afterwards that he really was struggling with the clutch. So going into the first corner, Piastri was leading Leclerc, and then we saw an absolutely brilliant move by Lando Norris, who went around the outside of Russell to take 3rd place, and it was a really gutsy move. Clearly Lando had a lot of confidence in his car, and a lot of confidence that George was going to leave that space for him and not push him wide. My family and I were watching this race together, and that mega start by McLaren certainly took our interest straight away because, like myself, the rest of us, I think, were kind of waiting for the inevitable Ferrari go straight to the front, Mercedes catch them up. So to see the McLarens really come to the fore again was really, really great to see. It's great when you get an unexpected surprise like that, and absolutely fantastic for Piastri after 2 DNSs, straight away taking the lead of the race. In contrast, Hülkenberg had a terrible start. He went from 13th down to 19th, which meant he lost 6 places, much to the annoyance of the teen in my family, who won the Family Predictions Trophy last year, who had decided to play his wildcard this week and predicted that a driver would lose 7 places off the start. So while we don't wish any ill on Hülkenberg, my teenage son was really rather annoyed to get very, very close to his wildcard and not quite get it. So there was a lot going on in the opening laps of the race. Antonelli had ended up down in 6th, Russell had dropped back to 4th on lap 1, but Antonelli manages to get past Hamilton by the end of lap 1. In the meantime, Piastri is actually pulling away and leaving a bit of a gap behind him. Further down the field, on lap 2, there was a scrap going on between Verstappen and Hadjar. Verstappen manages to get past Hadjar, and then Ocon passes Hadjar as well. Russell manages to catch up with Norris and get past him on lap 3, and then passes Leclerc to take 2nd place. He chases down Piastri and finally gets past him on lap 8, due mostly to the faster cornering speed of the Mercedes. But Piastri comes back and takes the lead again. Antonelli gets past Norris on lap 11, then past Leclerc on lap 16, which Leclerc quickly regains into turn 1. Then that's where it starts to get interesting with the pit stops. We know it's a one-stop race and everybody's going to end up on hards to the end of the race. Norris is actually the first to pit on lap 16. On lap 19, Piastri boxes, is complaining of some tyre graining and feels that he can get to the end on the hards. When he comes out of the pits, he's behind Verstappen, who he gets past on lap 21. During this time, Russell and Leclerc also decide to pit, but then we end up with a safety car on lap 22. After Bearman suffers that absolutely horrific crash at 50 Gs. Thankfully, Bearman is reasonably okay. And the issues around the Bearman crash and battery and the regulations, I'll get to later. I think there's quite a lot has been said about it, and there's more to say. So, of course, under the safety car, Antonelli, Hamilton basically get a free pit stop, which Russell complains about that at length on the radio. Can understand his frustration. I would like to think that he had either not seen that Ollie had had a bad crash at this point or had already asked if Ollie was okay. I would think that going on previous form, George would have either not been aware of what had happened to Ollie or would have already checked and made sure he was okay. But I fully understand the frustration when he's done so well to fight his way back and then Antonelli gets the free pit stop. So the safety car comes in on lap 28 and the race resumes. On lap 42, we end up with another Ferrari scrap between Leclerc and Hamilton. And again, very enjoyable scrap. And again, they get very close. I do quite strongly believe that it's simply a matter of time before what I see as the inevitable happens. And if they keep having these scraps as respectful and as clean as they've been so far, I think eventually there is going to be contact. And I don't think that either one or both of them is going to come out of it very well. And I should imagine there'll be a few stern conversations in the garage. But in the meantime, let's enjoy it. Let's enjoy the racing because they are very equally matched in those Ferraris. I think Charles has probably had the upper hand over Hamilton this weekend, but we know that can turn and that can change from racetrack to racetrack. So I think we're going to see plenty more of these battles, but whether they'll all be as clean as the ones we've seen so far, I'm not convinced. So as we get towards lap 48, Hamilton gets overtaken by Norris for the 5th place. Hamilton takes it back. Leclerc also passes Russell at the same time. On the Aston Martin front, although Stroll has retired, it was great to see that Alonso actually finished the race. So that's the first legitimate finish for Aston Martin. And our end result was Antonelli took the second win on the bounce, with Piastri second and Leclerc in third. There was also some interesting battles going on further down the field, which I'll touch on further, as I did feel that there was some issues with the coverage this week. So overall, yeah, another convincing win for Antonelli. I do feel, obviously, as most will, that he was helped by the timing of the safety car. There's a lot of questions about whether Piastri could have held on, could have kept Antonelli behind him and taken the win. I think there's every chance he could have done. The Mercedes do still seem to have the superior pace, but McLaren have definitely unlocked something in that car and definitely are starting to look like they're going to become the second fastest team. And as I've said from the outset of this season, I think we will see them up there scrapping for the Constructors' Trophy. I did say, obviously, that I thought there was every chance Lando could get back-to-back Drivers' Championships, and I'm not saying it's off the table. I really don't think it is. But I do think his look's going to have to change because so far he's not got off to the best start. And yes, I know we can argue that Piastri probably got off to a worse one with 2 DNSs. But going forward, Piastri has more going in his favour, I think, than Lando does. So we'll have to see how that plays out. But yeah, it's encouraging to see the McLaren's really taking it to the Mercedes. It was interesting to see that the Mercedes really didn't seem to progress through the field this weekend in the way that they have done before. When they've lost the lead at the start to the Ferraris in the last couple of races and in the sprint, they've managed to claw their way back. That they've managed to, the Ferraris have disappeared into the distance, but the Mercedes have got the superior pace and have come back. But now we've got McLaren in the mix there as well. It seems to have put the brakes on Mercedes a little bit. And I was quite surprised to see, especially for Russell, who's not had the most auspicious weekend, that once they were kind of held back in the pack a little bit, they struggled an awful lot more than I thought they would. So I am really looking forward to see how this carries on unfolding once we get to Miami, because the teams have now got more or less 4-5 weeks to work on the cars, to unlock more performance, to learn even more about the cars. I mean, it's going to be great for McLaren because both cars finished, so they've got a lot more data to work with than they did have. Clearly, they'd already unlocked something already for this weekend. I think what a lot of people predicted to be a Mercedes-Ferrari fight all season will end up going 3 ways, and it will be a Mercedes-Ferrari-McLaren fight. And I am not completely writing Red Bull off. It doesn't look good at the moment. They really, really are seeming to struggle. Max is far less than impressed with the car. I think they've got the important bit right. I think the power unit seems to be okay. I think it seems to be aerodynamically, they're just not finding the setup. They're not maximising the performance they could have at all. But again, they've also got this unexpected gap with which to work on that. So definitely don't write them off, but they've got ground to make up now. So coming back around to Ollie Bearman's crash, he wasn't having the best weekend anyway. I do feel quite upset as I praised Ollie at length recently, and I think the words I used were Ollie could do no wrong. And I still stand by the fact that I think he's done incredible this season, and I think he's going to go on to do far more incredible things. Don't quite understand why he had such a struggle in qualifying this weekend, but he is still only in his second proper full year of F1. Nobody's going to have an absolutely amazing weekend every weekend, and he is in a Haas, which is not a top car. But yeah, disappointing to see him struggle like that. Not really managed to find out anything much about why he struggled. But really the low point for Bearman's weekend must have been his crash, which was absolutely horrific. 50 Gs is a serious crash, a very serious crash, and certainly the onboard looked quite terrifying. I did suspect that he'd actually broken an ankle from the way he was moving and the way that he put his hand to his ankle when he sat down. So I noticed when he first got out of the car, there was a slight limp, but I've seen this myself in marshalling when a driver is hurt, that sometimes that adrenaline from the crash, they get up and they move, and then seconds later it really catches up with them. And I've seen drivers collapse. I've seen drivers realise that they've got broken bones. It is that adrenaline initially that keeps them going. So when I saw him then start to really limp and then sit down and I saw him put his hand to his ankle, I was, oh no. I was really, really praying that he didn't have a broken ankle or any kind of broken bone. As it turns out, apparently he's got a contusion on his knee. I think he's going to be sore for a little while, probably some swelling throughout his knee. And I think that's probably from the side impact where his knee has knocked against the inside of the car, or maybe his knees have knocked together. So yeah, I imagine Ollie will be a little bit sore for a while. So he's probably quite pleased that there's a bit of a gap for him to fully recover from that. But he was incredibly lucky because that could have been so much worse. And of course, it's opened up the conversation again because initially, say my family and I were watching it together. And on the first glance from the onboard, there was some opinions in the room that Colapinto was at fault. But on a rewatch, and you see the closing speed that Ollie has over Franco, you quickly realise that Franco had absolutely no chance to see Ollie come in there at all. And this is something that a lot of the drivers have spoken about before. In fact, Max Verstappen spoke about it well before these regulations came into being. And Franco was harvesting for the battery, and Ollie was going flat out. And that is a very, very dangerous speed to be catching someone at. And although his crash, Bearman's crash, was terrible, it could have been an awful lot worse. If he'd have gone into the back of Franco and got that car airborne, it don't bear thinking about what might have happened. So I do agree with Carlos Sainz's comments in his post-race interview that during this break, the regulations need looking at, that is dangerous. That cannot be allowed to happen again. Something definitely has to change there. So we wish Bearman a speedy recovery and hope that he's back, all guns blazing for Miami. My other little negative from the weekend, and I'm sorry to be negative, but those of us watching were a little frustrated by some of the coverage on this race. I think they've done fairly well the last couple of races. We've had more little mini boxes that show the battles further down, but we seem to be really concentrating towards the latter part of the race on the Russell and Leclerc battle for third, which, while it was important, for quite a while there was not really a lot happening there. And the Hamilton-Norris fight for fifth was probably at least deserved a mini box for us to see that was also going on. Or failing that, even the Gasly-Verstappen fight for seventh, yes, it's only seventh place, but that was a good scrap that was going on there. And the positions changed around on more than one occasion. And I just feel that coverage dropped the ball a little bit there. We seem to be just watching Russell and Leclerc kind of pootling around, trying to not really achieve very much for the third place. There was no real scrapping going on. Russell wasn't really particularly trying to overtake Leclerc. He was following quite closely, but there was no real fight for the place. Whereas Hamilton and Norris were having a real ding-dong trying to secure that fifth place. And the same with Gasly and Verstappen. While they may not make that the main screen, I think it definitely deserved a mini box. And I do think I'd have certainly liked to have seen it. And members of my family certainly agreed that could have been done better. So, moving on to the predictions I made in the preview and the hit the mark and the pull over and park. And then we'll end with, and we always end with a little bit of positivity with the flattering ram. Beginning with my prediction for pole for the Japanese Grand Prix. I did in fact predict George Russell for pole. And we were close. He was second. He was still on the front row of the grid. I did think that George would be all out to stop Kimi getting 2 poles on the bounce. And I think he did try his best, but as we saw, he had a real struggle in qualifying. So yeah, it was Kimi that took pole, so I was wrong on that one. My top 5 in the race, In fifth, I put Piastri because I did think that he would definitely bounce back. But I think I underestimated how good the McLarens would be, how much progress the McLarens would make. So I did put Oscar down in fifth, and he exceeded my expectations completely by bringing the car home in second. So that was a really great drive. In fourth, I had Norris, which not quite. Still a far better weekend for Lando, much better, as I say, all round for McLaren. But in fourth, it was actually Russell, which had someone suggested that to me before the race, I think I would have been quite surprised. I definitely would have expected Russell to be on the podium at very least. So the podium then, I predicted Kimi Antonelli to finish third. I thought he would possibly struggle a little more at the Suzuka circuit than he did. I think he coped with it absolutely brilliantly. In second place, I had Hamilton. I really did fancy the chances of Lewis having a second podium on the bounce. And I think with his buoyed confidence and the fact that he usually goes pretty well around Suzuka and that he's feeling quite comfortable in the car, I did expect him to be on the podium and hopefully in second, but no, unfortunately not. Obviously, third was Leclerc, who, when I said about the top 6 drivers, predicting the top 5 places was difficult. You were going to have to drop one out and assume that one of them wouldn't do very well. And I dropped out Leclerc. I had a feeling Leclerc was not going to have a great weekend this weekend, and that was very, very wrong because he finished third. And in second, as I say, I picked Hamilton, but it was in fact Oscar, and I'm absolutely so pleased for Oscar. I just think what a great turnaround. That was brilliant, and he drove such an excellent race. I'm not at all surprised to see he got driver of the day. I don't think anybody could argue that one. And yeah, Antonelli was our winner, but I predicted Russell to win this week. I did say in the preview that he really needed to pull this back this week and make sure that he's stamping his claim very, very firmly on that Drivers' Championship, because Kimi getting 2 wins on the bounce and Russell not even being second to him this week is not what George needs for his championship chances. But it is very early days. We had these kind of conversations last year when Piastri looked like he was going to run away with the championship in the first few races, and that's not how that went. So it's very, very early days yet. And the one thing we do know is that George has proved himself to be Mr. Consistency. Last year, he wasn't always on the podium, but he was always as near as he could be. He was always in the points. He knew that he didn't have the car to beat the McLarens, but he was always bringing it home in thirds and fourths and sometimes a little better. And as we saw in Canada, taking the win. So we know that Russell can consistently put in the performance. I'm a little worried that while Antonelli is brilliant, that it's going to be flashes of brilliance. Can he actually consistently keep this level of form up throughout the season? It's going to be interesting to see. Now, something I got right. I know, shocking, isn't it? For the hit the mark, I picked Gasly. I said that so far this season has shown great form. He's consistently bringing the car home in the points. He's driving his socks off in that car. I think he's doing absolutely amazingly. And sure enough, again, he's done it this week. He's brought the car home in 7th, absolute best of the rest again. And people are, I've noticed now, really starting to sit up and take notice and mentioning how well Gasly is doing. Even Verstappen paid him a compliment on his driving and saying how difficult he was to get past. And yeah, great. I'm so pleased that I picked Gasly, and I'm even more pleased that I was right. And long may it continue. Really hoping, I would love to see him get a podium this year. I just think he works so hard and he really, really deserves it. Moving on to pullover and park, wasn't quite such a successful pick as Gasly. This one, I predicted Audi to have an absolute struggle this weekend. And realistically, no, they didn't. They did pretty well. They had a fairly solid qualifying, with Bortoleto doing amazingly to qualify in 9th. Hulkenberg managed to qualify in 13th. And then in the race, Hulkenberg finished in 11th, which is the standing joke, isn't it, that he always finishes in 11th, just outside the points. And Bortoleto finished in 13th, which was not amazing. I mean, they didn't set the absolute track alight this weekend, but they certainly did not have an absolute disaster like I thought they were going to. But that's actually quite good to see. It's good to see them getting that good qualifying in there, getting those race results in there. So I'm actually quite pleased to be wrong on that one, because I'd like to see Bortoleto and Hulkenberg do well. So now for our little bit of positivity to end on. And it's our flattering ram. And I had a little bit of a back and forth with myself about this flattering ram this week. So what I settled on in the end is an honorary mention before the flattering ram. And my honorary mention goes to the Japanese fans, who I think are absolutely incredible. I absolutely thoroughly enjoy the crowd shots from the Japanese Grand Prix. The effort that a lot of the fans go into to make their posters, to make these amazing hats and these incredible creations that they wear, the mini drivers, all these things really, really showcase the passion that the Japanese fans have for the sport. And I think it's really, really wholesome and really heartwarming. So yeah, it's one of the many reasons that I would love to go and watch a race at Suzuka. I just think the fandom there is super positive. Even the national anthem, which I know is something the drivers have to go to. And while it's not something I would actively avoid, it's not the thing that I tune in for, especially to see the country's national anthems and to listen to their national anthems. But the Japanese one this year was really, really amazing. I must admit, I don't know who performed it. I probably should have looked that up before I recorded this, really. But I think they did an incredible job, so that was really enjoyable as well. So yeah, the whole aesthetic and the fandom in Japan, I really, really enjoy that. So an honourable mention there. My actual flattering ram this week will go to a driver, and it's probably a little bit predictable because you've heard me mention him already, but it's going to go to our Oscar Piastri. I think that Oscar drove an absolutely amazing race. That start was incredible. The fact that he managed to hold back the Mercedes as long as he did, and but for him a badly timed safety car, there was a good chance he could have actually won the race. So although there is that little tinge of disappointment, I really don't think that Oscar should be too disappointed with his comeback. I thoroughly enjoyed watching him drive this weekend. One of our family members, in fact the youngest family member, is an absolute Oscar Piastri fanatic, absolutely adores him. So it was really, really nice to see, after the two disappointments of the DNSs, that he got to see his driver drive and got to see him drive really, really well. So yeah, that was extra special. And the other thing we love about Oscar is that dry wit, those dry comments that he makes. I just find them so funny. In free practice, when they went 3 into a corner and he came out the worst, the little dry comment of, well, that went well. And again today, when the team were congratulating him for bringing it home in second, his little comment about, oh, we're quite good at this when we actually start, aren't we? I love that about Oscar. I love that dry, sarcastic wit. I think he's very, very genuine and very, very likeable. And it's absolutely brilliant to see him back up there fighting at the top end. So let's have more of that, please, Oscar, going forward. And also for Lando as well. I'd love to see Lando getting back up there. As you know, I predicted him in my pre-season predictions for back-to-back World Drivers' Championships. I think he's very much on the back foot now. This issue with the battery that he's had, that he's on his last battery now, that is really not going to help anything. And as he said, a bit similar to last year, he's not fully comfortable in the car yet. But I think once we get to the European races again, we're going to see Lando really take off like a rocket. So yeah, all positive that we're getting McLaren in the mix there. Absolutely brilliant for Piastri. So Piastri is this week's flattering ram. So now we're on a bit of an impromptu break from F1, aren't we? But I will not be going too far. I'm going to be doing a couple of extra episodes to fill the gap while we count down to our sprint weekend in Miami. Then it's another couple of weeks break again, unfortunately. But when we get to Canada, it's another sprint weekend. So for me, that's great because I do enjoy the sprint weekends. So in the meantime, please do tune in and keep me company on our couple of special episodes. And if that's not your thing, I'll see you just before Miami for our Miami preview. So have a great week. Have a great Easter, and I will see you soon. Don't forget the cheesy tagline. That Tracks F1 podcast. Track reaction. Join the fun.